Hi, I'm Nate, and I race dirt bikes through the woods.
So, to give context to people listening, because that is a very weird thing, this is a hobby of yours, correct? That you do on the weekends.
Yep, my recreation.
What is it actually called?
Preferred format is called enduro racing, but I
Okay.
also race hair scrambles as well.
Is there a difference between those two?
Yeah, format's pretty different.
What's the difference? Like, what's a couple main key differences between those two?
Probably the primary is enduro. You're more racing against a clock or the clock. You're still racing against your competitors, but not like specifically next to each other in the woods. Whereas hair scramble, like you start against your competitors and you're banging bars off the line till the finish.
So, people could equate that more to like the motocross, what they would see on television.
Yep, that'd be much more similar to hair scramble, except in the woods.
Interesting. So there, so motor or dirt bike racing, I think is fascinating in general. But from the hair scrambler, from a person who's only seen dirt bike racing on TV in a motocross setting, what is the main difference from what you're doing on the weekends?
Well, for one, it's amateur. What I do is mostly amateur, but the biggest difference I would say between woods racing and like motocross, what you're used to seeing on TV, is the lack of huge jumps and just you're mostly ripping through the woods as fast as you can, dodging trees or whatever else might be out there, versus a kind of a set up track that you're either learning as you practice on it or whatever. But there's like a rhythm more so to motocross or supercross than there is to racing through the woods.
So with the woods do you run the same part of the race multiple times? Like, do you see the same part?
Only in the hair scrambles. In the enduros, it's almost always completely new. Like you don't know the course at all in an enduro, and that's part of the appeal to it for me.
That's interesting. Do you feel that's riskier then?
Yes and no. In some ways, yes, and some no.
Okay. So, do you have so when you're signing up for a race, do they is there a map that you can study? Like, do you know anything about the track?
No, you can watch some courses. You can watch like GoPro videos of guys that did it a year prior or whatever. But there's commonly course changes. You can't be sure in an enduro what the course is going to look like, even from a condition standpoint. That is part of the appeal. Is like you don't know what to expect.
So it's all reflex.
Pretty much, yeah. And reading the course, whatever you can see of it.
And what speeds are you going at, like on average?
Mm, I would say like 20 miles an hour is actually fast as an average. That sounds slow, but in like tight woods, it's not.
Yeah, not on an average. Yeah, and like when you say tight woods, like these trees are separated just enough to get your handlebars through.
In the tight courses, yeah, like that, and that's another appeal to the enduros is typically the courses are tighter and they're just not as wide open and fast. And when you're old like me and you got to go to work Monday morning, like the penalty for wrecking in really high speeds, and motocross is a great example of this, can be pretty high.
Yeah. Is the tree aspect of this hair scramble enduro the riskiest part?
Mm, Overall, I'd say yeah. A lot of guys are afraid of rocks. There's different. That's another thing that's interesting about our sport. Depending on where you're at geographically, you have a pretty wide array of terrain, and even locally to here, within a few hours, it changes pretty significantly. But in general, I'd say trees are probably your biggest obstacle.
So you can have a major terrain change inside of a single race.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what does that look like? Like, what's one of the crazy courses that goes like what all you're seeing?
Well, around here locally, we have cold country up north, and that has like some pretty significant elevation changes, pretty crazy rock sections, and just even the soil itself changes depending on where you're at, in the course. Some other places like Jersey, New Jersey, or the terrain is more similar, throughout the course, but I like the variation. Some guys that ride Jersey all the time hate PA and New York and vice versa, and it's just different obstacles.
So how far do you go for this weekend hobby?
Mostly PA, New York, New Jersey, mostly. But I mean, I've gone as far south as Florida to race, as far north as Canada,
Oh,
just to
wow.
check out new terrain, new areas.
Is Canada way different?
No, no, actually, Canada was most similar to New Jersey, I would say.
Okay.
At least the parts of Canada that I went to. I'm sure there's some pretty different terrain up there.
How long's the season for this?
Normally starts, well, we go south in February because the weather's nicer down there. It's pretty crappy up here. Uh, Start off our season down in South Carolina in February just to kind of get things kicked off. But locally, early March and ends early November, late October.
Okay. So you have run some of these races in not so warm weather.
Yes, and yeah, and I say this to a lot of people in our sport. Like I consider myself pretty tough when it comes to a lot of things, but I can't stand the cold. So when it's if there's snow on the ground or it's like really frigid out, like my hands freeze or whatever, I am such a wuss when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, and then 20 miles an hour at that even seems so much colder.
Once the juices get flowing and the day, the day's progressing, and of course it's obviously getting warmer as the day gets later, it's much less of a problem, but early in the morning is brutal for me.
What got you into first motorcycles in general and then actually dirt bike racing?
When I was a kid, probably about 5, I'd say, my dad got me a mini bike. It was
Mm,
kind of more of a really dumbed down dirt bike, more so than a mini bike, not just straight up, like didn't have like a lawnmower engine on it or anything. But uh, then a buddy of mine, probably when I was, I don't know, 10 or 12, he got a dirt bike and we were riding that, and it seemed fun. Got a dirt bike, got into motocross, and I was like 13 to 15.
okay.
Kind of liked it, but didn't love it. I enjoyed it, but didn't love it near like I like racing in the woods. At that
At
time, I
that
didn't know woods racing existed.
at that age, were you running what, like a 125?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Two stroke?
Yep.
Screaming.
Yep. I wasn't as fearless back then. Not that I'm fearless now, but I was more timid.
Interesting. Wonder why is that? That's usually the opposite.
I don't know. I don't know, and I see that same quality in my son. He's 12, and he's not like he won't let it all hang out yet. He won't get crazy even in like football and baseball. I, I don't know. I don't know that I had that same competitiveness. Not that I'm ultra competitive, but I'm not going out there to
Have fun.
well, have fun. Yes, absolutely, but not lollygag. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to go give it my best effort. And I don't think I had that same drive when I was that age.
So before we get into the actual season, because we talk about this quite a bit, when you're in your off season, what are you doing? Like, what are you prepping and what are you getting ready for the season?
I'm not very good in the off season. I saw a post on Facebook midwinter of a guy, a fellow racer. I don't really know him, but I saw him say that, he really enjoys working on his bike without the pressure of the upcoming race, right? And I couldn't be more opposite. I kind of need that pressure, and I don't know why it motivates me, but it does. So to answer your question, for the most part, I kind of hibernate over the winter.
Okay. So you let the bike sit, you clean it up after that final race and you don't touch it again until how close to the season?
If it's lucky, I clean it up, and but but probably month to a couple weeks before.
Okay.
I mean, I keep up with the maintenance, so I don't let it. It's not like in terrible condition over the winter, but
Yeah. Have you always worked on your own bike? Like, did you learn that at a young age too?
yes and no. My dad helped me with some of that when I was younger. When I raced motocross when I was younger, my dad was kind of like my mechanic / drove me around because I was too young to drive. Uh, Again, this is all on a very amateur level, but yeah, I learned all that then around that time, and then just kind of do mostly everything myself. There's been some times where I was really busy in life and I paid other guys to take care of some stuff for me, but I would say 95% of it I do myself.
So you're a week out from your first race. It doesn't have to be the first race of the season, but what does that week look like? How are you preparing?
Mm, I mean, mostly it's just acclimating myself with the routine because once you get into race season rhythm, like it's kind of pretty freaking routine, and you know what you got to do, what you got to have done, when you got to start it based on how much, how bad did you beat your bike or body up, the weekend before.
Mm.
But it it I forget the original question. What was the question?
No, like what are you doing? What are you prepping for all week? Are you eating specific? Are you
No,
stretching? Are you getting the bike ready? What does that look like?
I'm really bad with that too. My race prep, nutrition wise, is pretty much carb up the day before a race. Like
Okay.
try to hit some pasta hard before the race because you do. I ran into a couple times. I'm pretty. One of my strengths is endurance, and I had a couple times in I think 2022 where in a hair scramble towards the end I felt depleted, and that is a very foreign feeling to me. And I chalked it up to, oh my gosh, you basically starved yourself the day before unintentionally, and you just didn't, I
You
don't
ran
know.
out of calories.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Okay. So, you prepping tires, you change an oil. Like, do you have to change oil like, what does that look like
Yep,
for the actual bike?
every race, wash the bike after, and sometimes that's the day after, sometimes it's the day before the next race. And now a lot of that has to do, like, if you never even hit the ground all race and nothing crazy happened, you probably just need to do the routine stuff. But wash the bike, change the oil pretty much right after that. Sometimes I'll change it, sometimes I'll just top it off. Yeah, tires are something I've been trying to do better at. I used to run them a lot longer, and that's not smart if you want to be competitive. So you're at least monitoring, if not changing them every couple races. Uh, just routine stuff, brakes, checking brakes, topping off fluids, just going over the bike. I will say, like, washing the bike, I have found to be the best way to give the bike a good once over and see what damage you
Mm.
may have done in the race.
Things you may not even remember or could see until you literally went over the whole thing.
Yeah, or you never even knew happened. A rock kicked up and, mashed something and you never felt it or saw it or heard it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you change your sleep schedule at all leading up?
No, and I'm pretty I'm pretty thrifty. So, like, if I can just wake up the morning of the race and travel, even if it's 4 hours away, I will do that. Now, if I have company, more likely to hotel something like that. But if I can save a couple $100 and just get up at 2 or 3 in the morning, go to a race, I'll do that. It
Do
makes
you
for a
notice
long
a
day.
difference in your performance versus staying or driving?
Not that I can measure. I'm not, but I'm not. That's not a strength of mine either. A lot of guys are really good at identifying what works for them, what doesn't, and or they're really picky about certain things and setup and stuff. And I'm the polar opposite. I think it's a good thing, a strength and a weakness. Uh, Sometimes I think it's for the better. Sometimes I think it's for the worse.
Hmm. Do you get nervous still?
Never.
Really?
I actually thought you might ask that, and I was thinking about that because I hear a lot of stories about that, and I don't know what triggers that. Like, I think I remember that when I was a kid when I raced motocross, being nervous. But, like, I hear guys can't eat the day of a race. I hear they're getting sick before a race. Like, even in the hair scrambles where it's like the ultimate, like, you're all going to take off the line at the same time, and it's pretty intense. I just don't seem. I don't know if I don't care enough or what. But that's not the part of the race that I'm concerning myself with. It's more the finish
Interesting. So you're pretty much just racing yourself that entire time.
for the most part. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Like
I
like in
think,
the hair scrambles, I think a lot of guys like they want to get that start, get out in front and lead. And I don't like that pressure off the start, so I'll actually let them go. What I take pride in like a hair scramble, which is so weird, but it's what I like, is that my lap times don't get slower, like that they get faster. I'll study that after a race, and if I saw them get slower, I either remember something that happened, like I got stuck somewhere or something, but there needs to be answers internally for me if I did not get faster.
Interesting. Yeah, so you're looking at the race as a whole versus really focusing on people may focus on out of the gate, getting moving really quickly. You're comparing each lap to lap.
Yeah, there's something that's really common with dirt bike racers called arm pump, which it's the primary contributor is you're gripping too tight, and it's
Hmm.
usually at the start of a race. And what happens is then you're like the blood or something fills up in your forearms. Like my forearms will get rock hard. Like if you touch them, they're like rock hard, and then your hands go numb. And as I understand it, most everyone experiences this, but it seems like I get it pretty extreme. So I hate the pressure of being out front or whatever at the lead. It just it intensifies that. Whereas if I can be a little more casual, lay back, and then try to run them down later, that's what I prefer.
Interesting. You like to see what's in front of you and chase it down. Hmm. Okay. So walk me through a whole race weekend. So it's Friday, you're super jacked, you're barely staying in your seat at work, and you're thinking about this race. What you leave work, whatever time, what does that weekend look like?
Unless I know I got a lot of work to do to the bike, I'm pretty much snoozing that till Saturday morning. So getting up Saturday morning, got to have my coffee, and then getting out in the garage as soon as I can and feel comfortable that I'll have the work done. That can bleed into Friday sometimes too if I'm going to be hoteling it Saturday night and I got to travel on Saturday. But it's usually probably on average 4 hours of garage time on Saturday. A lot of that includes, packing, making sure I got all my gear and everything that I'm ready for Sunday. So that Sunday morning, because a lot of these enduros start pretty early in the morning and are far away, it's just get in the truck and drive.
How early? How early are we talking?
So normal key time they call it, which is the start of the first row of an enduro race, is 9 a.m. And I heard Vader, and I can have to travel anywhere from two to the closest races are like an hour and a half away, and the furthest ones are like 4 hours away. And probably on average try to get to the race an hour before it starts. So if you back that up an hour, an hour before 9 would be 8, and a race on average probably 2.5 hours away. So you're leaving what 5:30? Yeah, right, 5:30. So getting up around 4:30.
Sorry, my dog's freaking out. I'm assuming at the Amazon driver in the background. So if you are driving, so are all races on Sundays? I don't know if I knew that.
Yes, all the enduros and the adult hair scrambles are on Sundays. There's youth hair scrambles on Saturdays.
How do you make it to work Monday morning?
Well, you'll see I do take off some Mondays just because I've got vacation and why kill myself. But
Yeah.
if we're like 4 hours away and it's a long day, part of the fun for us is me and my buddies, group of buddies, we'll sit down after the race, have a couple beverages, have some burgers and stuff on the grill. So it can be a long day and you can get home pretty late. So if it's something really, really far away, I will take off that Monday, but that's only a few times a year.
Yeah. And so when you're getting ready, I'm assuming everybody unloads everything. You're unloading the bike right when you get there. You're kind of doing a final check. What does all that look like? Just getting like you're from the point that you show up to the actual site or location to when you're getting in the line. Like how does the heat? Do they have heats? Like how does that all work?
No, there's no practice or heats or anything with this format, with either of those two formats. Uh, you're really just showing up, going and checking in. All the scoring is digital. It's all through you have a little transponder on your helmet.
Okay.
You're really just getting your gear all out. I'm going to have a pretty regular routine that it's hard to mess it up. But I pretty much know if I get there an hour early, I'm probably going to have about a half hour for any unforeseens and then 15 minutes to get geared up and get to the line and get ready. Like you usually try to get there, basically be on the line or wherever the start is about 15 minutes before.
How does the where you are on the line? How does that work?
So in the enduros, they had this is part of where you're racing the clock and not your competitors. In the enduros, it's just rows of riders, which are for the most part arbitrary. There's some exceptions to that, and so most guys, if you're attending the race with friends, you're racing with those friends. So like I have a group of buddies that we're regularly on the same row with, and we oddly prefer to be up front in enduros. When I say oddly, it's because being up front enduros, the benefit is you don't have traffic to navigate through. There's nobody in front of us. It's just us. Uh, the bad part is the downside to that is the course is not run in much. Like there's not been bikes that went through, so you can only really read arrows, and or you're pretty dependent on how well they did in marking the course.
So you're guessing in some spots.
Sometimes the arrowing's not that great, and you got to guess. Sometimes the weather the night before tore arrows down and made it even worse, right? But we kind of just do it because we think it's the most fun course of the day. It's not the fastest course of the day, but the alternative is if you're way in the back, the course can be beat to hell and just miserable sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. So a happy medium is somewhere in the middle, and that's where they'll normally put like the pro guys so that they have a little bit more of an even playing field. But I don't know. We just started this several years ago, running up front, and nobody really fights us over it. So we do it, and people think we're crazy, but we have a lot of fun up there.
That's cool. What does your gear look like? What does that entail?
At 46 years old, as much as you can protect yourself with, because I don't heal like the guys in their 20s. But I mean, so you got like chest, shoulder, elbow protection. I do. I have like a suit that's almost like a Under Armour type thing that armor's built into, like a fit to my body. You wear lots of layers in places that chafe. Lots of layers. So like if you have a chafe point, you usually put like a base layer on underneath your exterior layer. That seems to be the help there. Knee guards are critical. A lot of guys wear knee braces, especially if you have knee problems. I still don't. Hope I never do. Hopefully not wearing knee guards or knee braces doesn't bite me.
Is the knee brace for when you're putting your leg down or hitting things, or what's that for?
Yeah, more if you get like your foot caught in something that it twists your knee or weird or whatever. I've had one or two instances where I thought, man, maybe I should have had a brace on, but knock on wood, I haven't had anything detrimental to my knees. Boots are huge. It's one of the things I've learned. Helmet and boots over the years are worth the investment of what when I was a younger racer seemed like an insane amount of money to spend, but I think my boots retail are like $530
Wow.
and worth every penny.
What makes a good boot?
Just basically overall strength, and on top of that, still being able to move your foot in it. Like there's been times where I've straight up smashed the hell out of my foot against a tree, and I remember one time distinctly thinking at the end of the day, I'm going to take my boot off and my toes are going to be laying in my boot. Thankfully they weren't. They were pretty tore up and some were broken, but I think if I didn't have a high end boot, it would have been a mess in there. They're just really, really, they take a hit really well. And even twists of the ankle, they help immensely with that.
And what about that? What makes a good helmet good?
I don't know. I actually wore cheap helmets for years until about 3-4 years ago, and I think I spent like $400 or $500 on the helmet I have now. It's definitely way lighter. Has it protected my head anymore? I don't know. You're smacking your head off all kinds of stuff out there.
What about breathability? Is that important?
Yes, and that also contributes to that arm pump. Part of the problem with the arm pump in the morning, holding your breath because you're tense. You're tight, and you don't even realize you're doing it. So actually do like some breathing coaching in your helmet at times when you remember to, like literally telling yourself to breathe out loud.
Do you wear headphones while you race?
No, I don't know how anybody listens to anything other than motor when they ride or race.
So you're listening to shifting, all that stuff.
The RPMs, power delivery, yeah.
Okay. Anything else in the gear? Gloves, I'm assuming.
Yes, gloves. They're another one where you can sometimes use base layers to help with blisters or chafing. Can't think of, I mean, jersey pants, but they're pretty straightforward. I think that's pretty much it.
Goggles.
Yes, goggles. Yep, good call.
And that's because I'm assuming when you're behind one of your buddies ripping down a new trail.
Well, even branches, there's lots of little face slappers. The clubs do the best they can to clear that kind of stuff, but you can't get it all. And it don't, I wouldn't want to know what a bad eye injury,
Oh,
turns into.
so are there actually motocross glasses? Because I'm assuming they have some sort of like protective shield from shatterproof and stuff like that.
I don't know. I mean, I've never had to wear like glasses or contacts, but I know some guys have like inserts inside their goggles that are like, their glass lenses. Other guys wear contacts. I don't know. I hope I never find out.
Interesting. At an actual race, what bike types are super popular? What's a lot of people?
Austrian, Austrian KTM and all the companies that they own. It basically, if you don't own one of them, you're either like super loyal to a brand for some reason, or you're just spiting them. But they seem to have they've for woods racing, they got the bikes.
Okay.
So
Is
I
there a
have one, and I don't like being part of the orange cult, is what it's called. So I kind of decorate mine so it doesn't look like one, but everybody knows that it is. It's just a
but you had to conform because of the performance.
yeah, yeah.
What makes them so good?
They're built specifically for what we do, woods racing. The other manufacturers, I feel like, have tried to. Some of them have tried to get in line with them, but they're behind. And the big sport is motocross and supercross. So the majority of the bikes are either designed for that or derived from that, right? So KTM and again the companies that they own, they also are designed. They have their line designed for woods race, and they're just ahead. They're just ahead of the other brands.
What is that design like? What is the design difference? What's a couple major things that come out?
So up until recently, with like motocross and supercross, they didn't have electric start. Now, recent years, I'm probably aging myself making that comment, but they almost all. There's only one brand anymore that doesn't have electric start. That can be huge out in the woods. Some guys still don't agree about that. Much more plush suspension, even a freaking kickstand. Some guys don't think that's important, but I just feel like it's a convenience for when you're in the woods. Enduros, a lot of them, you're supposed to have street legal-ish bike, so headlight, license plate, tail light. The KTM's, the woods versions come with that, right off the showroom floor. Uh, just lots of little things that are catered to that type of riding.
Is there a CC restriction or engine size restriction?
So there's classes. There's different classes for which you race. They are mostly either based on bike size, which would be CCs, or age. I've raced both. The past few years now, I've been racing a CC class. I got a 200, and it allows me to run in a smaller CC class for which it's tougher to compete in that. I will say though, like commonly when there are people in my class, basically most of the people that run the bike that I run are much younger than me, and some of those kids like just whoop my ass.
What makes a good racer in either the enduros or separate from the hair scramblers?
Uh, well, I mean, fitness is good. It's definitely a benefit, absolutely, but mainly seat time and just not fighting the bike is what I try to tell people. Like, if you're out there, it doesn't matter how fit you are. If you're battling your bike or battling the course or just, really trying to manhandle things, or I'm not wording that right, but you're going to fail. You're not going to do well. Uh, the the fastest guys, they just flow. They just flow, and you even feel it yourself on certain courses or days where you're really hitting your marks or whatever. It feels easy. I can't explain it, but you definitely have your days where things just aren't going your way, and it feels like you're fighting the whole way through the day. I can't figure out an exact rhyme or reason to that as to why that happens both ways sometimes. And I've heard other people say the same, but the really, really good guys, Of course, they're fit too, but they just flow with the bike. They just gel with it.
So it's almost like a runner's high when you hit that like certain distance and then they don't feel pain anymore. Like when you say hitting your marks, I'm assuming that's like on a turn, around a portion, through whatever, or just you're just following the bike more than having to actually pull on handlebars and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're in more of like an attack position. You're able to make the bike do what you want it to do with little effort compared to,
Hmm.
some other times where you're really fighting it. I'm sure some of that is bike setup for me, and that's not a strength of mine at all. But it is a great feeling when everything comes together, when it just works, and I mean, you're almost not even tired by the end of the race.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, does that change race to race, or do you see yourself continually getting better to closer to that flow consistently?
I think I'm to the age now at 46 where I've kind of peaked out. Now, some of that is self-induced where again, I go to work on Mondays, so like I'm not hanging it out. I think I've kind of over the years found a pace that works for me where I can do well, but not hanging it out too much. And I have my moments too where I do some dumb shit, and I know we all do, but uh, for the most part, and my buddy, my one buddy that we've been racing for years, he's in his mid to late 30s, and he's given me crap lately, telling me I'm getting slower, right? And I'm like, no, dude, you're getting faster. He's the age where I started racing. Now he's that age, so he hasn't even hit his peak at speed yet, and he's just faster than me now, and he's making me look bad.
Hmm. So you have lots of trophies behind you. Like, how does scoring work in this whole thing?
So I keep speaking of enduros and forgetting to go to hair scrambles, but to be honest, the enduros is much more my passion.
Okay.
But the enduros, there is basically the club sets when they lay out the course a speed for the course for the day. So
And by
it's
speed, you mean a time?
yeah, like there's a time where you're supposed to be at certain checkpoints for which you don't know where they are, right?
Oh, wow.
You're just basically told, for this part of the course you need to run this speed, for this part of the course you run that speed, and it's only achievable when they want you to achieve it. So what that then means is where they want to take points from you, which is what they do in race sections, they make the speed faster than you can possibly go on the course. So at the end of the day, you get points that for every minute you're late to those checkpoints, you get points for that. And at the end of the day, low score wins.
So, and that's all based on the GPS tracker.
There's no real GPS tracker. They're using they're laying out the course with a very basic. It's a high end like odometer / trip computer on their bike when they're laying out the course.
Okay.
If
Oh,
that
that's
makes sense.
interesting. And there's certain sections where they're saying you should be hitting, I don't know, 25 miles an hour, and it's not possible.
Not for a human. I mean, there are times where the club underestimates how fast some of the pros go, and they do match the course speed when they didn't want them to.
Wow, that's interesting. That's almost like, I don't know, I guess it's like the par of the course for that section.
Yeah,
Mm,
and
okay.
and that hidden checkpoint location is another draw to the enduros for me. Like there's nothing unknown about a hair scramble. Like you can technically mountain bike the course beforehand if you want to, if you really want to stake out the course. I'm not at the level to give two craps about doing that, but some of the higher end guys will do that, and they'll have a plan for where they're going to hit certain lines and stuff. And then again, you're running laps, so when you come around, if you're not getting the white flag or checkered flag, you're just going to be running another lap of this course. And now it does change throughout the day with ruts and otherwise, and weather can be a big factor there too. But the beauty of the enduros to me is you don't truly know what's coming around the next turn,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
then you
that's
got to
really
go.
interesting.
You got to try to go at race pace without that knowledge.
So it's really it's a big mental game against yourself the whole time.
It is, and they'll do tricks too. Where I say there's like a time on the course, they'll try to trick you into coming early to checkpoints too. They'll just put little tricks in there, and early is worse than being late. You get more points deducted if you're early than if you're late.
What do you mean by that?
So they they will try to trick you into thinking like that there's no way there's going to be a checkpoint ahead. So you ride ahead a little bit just to get ahead, to get ready for the next race section or whatever. And then they sneak one in, they hide one in where you'd never suspect there'd be one because they want to take points from you. The club's trying to take points from you. That's their main objective, however they may do it.
Does that cause any like frustration with racers?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sometimes there'll be protests and sometimes checks, if the club doesn't hit their marks perfectly on what they did or they weren't, by the rule book about it, sometimes checkpoints will get thrown out.
Interesting. That's amazing. And so the scoring is are all the races in the same scoring like sport for the entire season, or is each club is its own little like scoring board?
There's scores for each race, and then of course you get points based on how you placed in each race. But the format can be slightly different from race to race too. There's several different formats even in the enduro world.
But there's one enduro season that you're a part of, and all of your scores add up to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the hardest part of enduro racing for you?
For me, probably the beginning of the day when my arms are all pumped up and I can't feel my hands. I feel like I'm in the minority there that's the hardest part, but it's the worst feeling when you can't grip the bike and make it do what you can't perform like you're capable of performing. It's frustrating.
How long does that last?
Usually in enduros, 1 to 2 sections. Sometimes they won't give us a warm up. We'll start racing right off the start, and then it's worse. But it's usually worse, obviously, in the first section for me. But it can haunt me for another 1 or 2 sections if I can't shake it.
How long do sections normally last? Like, what's the duration of a section on average?
So lengthwise, they're a minimum of 3 miles.
Okay.
That is probably over in, I don't know, you can do the math, but 10 minutes or whatever. We had one this first race this season. Longest one I ever had a race section be 22 miles straight. So
jeez,
a whole hair scramble. The last hair scramble I just did was 29, just shy of 30 miles. So this enduro race finished the day with basically a hair scramble for the most part.
Wow, that had to be intense.
I loved it because I loved the end of the day, but.
And you didn't know you were going into a 22-mile section?
There were indicators on they give you like a route sheet to kind of see the basics of the course, doesn't tell the full story. There were indicators that it was possible, and knowing this club, I thought they might do it, but deep down I didn't think they were gonna. That's a long ass section.
What makes something like that so long? It's just you got to stay in the zone for that long?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the big differences between enduros and hair scrambles is you're mostly sprinting in enduros, so you're mostly like 15 to 20 minutes. So like when I was going to the gym regular, I wouldn't be doing cardio for more than like 15 to 20 minute stints because that would be about what you would be doing a race section. So you're talking sprints for the most part in enduros, whereas a hair scramble, it's a 2 to sometimes 3, but usually 2 to 2.5 hour long endurance thing where your pace is a little different,
Sure.
So at 22 miles in an enduro, you start off hot, not thinking you're going to be going 22 miles. You can, deplete your energy quick.
Yeah. Especially, and it was the last section of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
mm-hmm.
What a giant slap.
That was in March, and it was a beautiful day for March, right? But some of these enduros, they go through the summer. Take a 95-degree Sunday, and if you would do somewhat of that, do that to people at the end of a 95-degree day, that'd be a lot of DNFs, I'm sure. People would tap out.
Do you run a hydration pack for that reason?
I do in enduros. I'm a little bit rare in hair scrambles. I don't, and the primary reason that I don't is because I've not been able to figure out a way and it must be the way I'm internally piped to drink and race without choking, and it pisses me off, so I stopped doing it. Whereas enduros, you get little breaks, so you can drink while you're not actually racing. You're still on the bike, but you're not racing.
Yeah.
And trust me, some of these hot summer day hair scrambles after 2.5 hours, I need a drink bad, but it doesn't seem worth it when I'm choking. I get pissed off. I'm choking on water while I'm trying to race.
What's the worst injury you had? Is the foot when you thought all your toes were broken?
Nah, probably the longest one it took to recover, and I'm pretty blessed, knocking on wood right now. But I tore my quadricep was the
Ooh,
worst one I had, and that took the longest recovery. But
how'd that happen?
It was a course where, so normally when you go through the race sections, normally the race sections are in like tighter woods, and then you'll come out of those tighter woods, and you'll come out onto like wider like sand roads, stone roads, or whatever, and normally you're not racing through those. In this case, the club still had us behind, and this was probably just an oversight on their part, where we technically had to still race down a sand road to get back on time.
So
So
you're
I was,
screaming down this
yeah,
road.
I was flying. You can go as fast as you want to go on those, so it's dangerous. And came around a blind turn to the whole road slash trail or whatever was just one big puddle, like as wide as the trail and as long as you could see. And I had one of two choices to make, which was to either back off of it and fall down in the middle of it, or just try to wheelie over it and see what happened. Well, I made it about 3/4 of the way through and crashed my freaking brains out. And I can only think I hit the bike or something and did that to my. I don't know how I actually tore my quad, but I finished that race, and by the end of the race, it was that like swollen that I could barely bend my knee.
Oh,
Prob-
what was the scariest near miss you ever had?
to be honest, that actually probably happened this year, practicing before the racing season started. I whiskey throttled, which is when you basically get off balance and your arm naturally pulls back on the throttle when you're not covering the clutch, right into a tree at crazy speed. And my buddy got GoPro video of it. And as it was happening, I was scared, but
Oh, geez.
it hit straight across my chest, right across my chest protector. And I don't think I've had a more effective moment of, your protection doing its job. Because I thought for
Wow.
sure broken ribs, or so I thought I was going to be a mess, but I actually hurt my wrist in that wreck. Was the worst part of it. But
Before the season didn't phase you at all. Right back to the season.
it was supposed to be, go out, get warmed up, don't do anything stupid. Well, guess what happened?
So with some of those, that's terrifying to me. What keeps you going back to this kind of stuff?
I think it's so I enjoy the sport big time. I enjoy having a hobby that keeps me active. Uh, I do. I there's a lot of dudes much old. Like I'm old in this sport, but there's guys much older than me still doing it very effectively and very competitively. That's encouraging to think it's something I could do for another 20 years or more. Uh, but in doing it, like the community and the friendships you develop, and more specifically with the tight group that we have that race together, but even community wide, like it's just a great bunch of people. And it's just fun. So between the fact that it's fun, you're on dirt bikes, it's good for you from a being active standpoint. Every part of it's just I can't think of one downside to it. It costs money, but what's fun that doesn't?
Yeah, no doubt. What's your proudest moment?
From a racing standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
uh, for me personally, I mean, my proudest moments are actually helping some of my buddies achieve year end goals. Like
Nice.
I remember our one buddy Tim. He was pushing for a year end. He wanted to win his class, and we were helping. Like when you're able to ride with people that are a little faster than you, they help you do better. So we were last enduro, and he's behind points. This guy's beating him by a couple points or whatever, and he's just got to. I think he just need to finish ahead of him or something like that. And this was the last race of the year. I'm leading. and I lead us right into what's called a burn, which is we went into a checkpoint early because somehow off the start I got my computer screwed up. So I started the race off by costing him 2 points that unless his competitor did
Ooh,
something really dumb, he was not going to have that problem. So I've never been more motivated to drag his ass through the rest of that course as fast as we could possibly go.
yeah.
And he ended up beating the guy pretty handily and won the year end. But there's been a couple times where I felt like our group was able to help some of these newer guys that would, achieve their goals there. So really proudest moments are those moments when, I don't know why I feel like I rally harder when somebody else's, at year end is on the line. But if I wanted to talk about me personally, it'd probably be that right behind my head. There's two trophies that look the same. 2022 is the only year where I ever won both the Enduro series and the Hair Scramble series in the same year. I've never won the Hair Scramble series outside of 2022.
That's crazy. So when you cost those 2 points, so you were just thinking, I got to scream through the rest of this race to get this guy his points back.
Yes, and I was thinking if he does not win this championship, I am not going to be able to sleep for weeks because I will feel like I cost him that. Yes.
What a motivation. And especially as a competitive person, that's even above competition.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
I was so mad at myself because we all have those computers that tell us if we're early or late, So right away, they all, they were the ones who told me I burnt that check, and I'm like, well, why did you guys follow me into it? If your computers are staring at you, telling you you're early, why did you follow me into it early? But they just thought I knew something or was on to something that they thought they were wrong.
Hmm. That's a good one. What's your of all the races you go to? What's your favorite and why? Like, which one do you look forward to?
It's probably this race right on the PA New York border. I think it's technically in PA, but you could throw a stone literally and hit New York. Uh, it's called Barbed Wire Enduro, and it's this club. Their name is Southern Tier Enduro Riders, and their slogan is "Nobody drinks more beer than Southern Tier." And you love it when you first pull in because you pull onto the property and there's this big sign out front that says absolutely no alcoholic beverages, and there's all these crushed up beer cans laying right in front of this sign. So their shtick is like nobody drinks like Southern Tier does, right? So on top of that, the course it's just beautiful terrain. When you get to like northern PA/southern New York, the elevation changes, the amount of rock, which is not offensive yet not non-existent, and just in general the terrain. It is a beautiful area around here that I just love riding up there so much. And between what the club puts on with it, the course itself, the event in general, and then the icing on the cake is when you come out of the last test section, you come out of the last race is complete. uh, there is a trailer with girls from the club and kegs of beer, and they hand you a solo cup of beer right after the race is over. And the joke I always have every year, and I almost effed this up one year, is that nobody's beating me to the beer at the end because we're the first row, right? So it's either got to be someone's got to pass us from behind, or somebody on my row's got to beat me. And I'm always like, I'm gonna be the first. I'm gonna get the first beer out of them kegs every year. So ever since I made that vow, I have been. I know my day's coming where I won't be, but that's my goal. Is that last section to be first to beer.
That's hilarious. What's your least favorite race?
Hmm, I'm not sure specifically, but so some of the New Jersey runs, unfortunately, happen in state forests where they're really restricted with how much trail they can use. So they get forced onto more like sand roads or just
Mm.
like woods, like not like actual trail. We call it single track, where the trail is like barely wide enough to get a bike through. When there's little to no single track, it's just not near as fun, and a lot of that has to do with the New Jersey forests just not letting them where they could potentially go.
What was the worst race experience?
Worst race experience. Dang, it's tough. Probably. If I thought harder about it, I might have a better answer. But when I tore my quad, I raced the next race like an idiot, and it was not fun. It was when I knew something was really wrong in there, and I ended up going to the doctor after that to find out I tore my quad. But it was when my heel hit stuff that in a certain way, it felt really, really bad in my leg, and I should not have done that.
Yeah, so you were fighting the pain the whole race.
Mm-hmm.
What was the best race experience?
Oddly enough, like probably the most memorable one was a freaking hair scramble. So I'm generally not very good at the hair scrambles. I don't love the format, and I just don't perform well in them. But there is one up in coal country. Reading Off Road Riders holds it, and normally I do decent there. And I think this was the year when I won the hair scramble series. I started off last, and there were these two brothers, much younger than me. One much younger than me, like I'm probably as old as their dad, and they had been whooping my ass all season long. Less so when we got out of New Jersey and into the rocks because Jersey is more sand based. And I remember mid race passing the one brother, and then second to last lap or last lap passing the other brother, crashing my brains out, getting back up, and passing him back probably about 5 minutes before the end of the race. And like seeing when I come out of there that I was first again, it was so ironic because I normally don't give two shits about hair scramble finishes, but besides the fact that all they ever did was whoop my ass, and I passed them on it. It was a very tough day, very hot, very long race, and crashed, got back up, and passed them back again. Like it just felt like a pretty significant accomplishment.
What's your dream bike?
Probably the bike I have. I don't know. It's
Get
it's kind
out.
of it's kind of funny because from a vehicle standpoint, I had this 20-year-old truck for the longest time. Well, obviously it wasn't always 20 years old, but it was way older than most people's vehicles, and I took a lot of pride in that. And then things changed in my personal life, and I had excuses for getting something newer, so I got something newer. But I'm kind of in that state with my bike. My bike's a 2014, which is pretty old by racer standards, and I just can't give up on. I love it too much. I can't find fault in it, so I can't see a reason to move on.
Okay. What's a dream race or a dream place to ride?
Ironically, the best venue is not a race. I mentioned the New York Pennsylvania border. There is a small town just across the northeast border of PA called Hancock, New York, and it's most famous for. I think it's really popular for fly fishing. Fly fishing,
Hmm.
but every year in August they hold a 2-day dual sport, and I always say that they are better than any enduro or otherwise at keeping you in the woods and actually on single track trail than any other event all year long. Uh, on top of that, I mentioned earlier about that area up there, the terrain between the elevation change, the rock that's not offensive, which it's a little more offensive in that particular area versus non-existent. I mean, no rock is just kind of too easy to me. It's kind of almost boring. But yeah, it's called Quarry Run Dual Sport in Hancock, PA. It's a 2-day event, and you are destroyed after 2 days in the most blissful way.
So, if I wanted to start doing this, what's 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give me to get ready for my first race?
Mostly tell newer people. Well, first of all, asking around as to what's a good race to start with, because some are not nearly as newbie
Okay.
friendly as others. But a real goal for a first enduro ever, and again, I keep talking about enduros, but to be honest, that's my true passion, uh,
Yeah.
would be to strive to finish. And don't be disappointed if you don't. But
Oh, okay.
I have seen seasoned riders who aren't used to doing 50, 60, 70 miles of trail a day, who are, I would consider them very good riders, who DNF'd enduros because they just aren't used to running that many freaking miles in one day. I mean, it's intended to be an endurance race.
Interesting. What bike would you start out with?
Uh, Man, got a lot of options, but I would definitely say something woods oriented, like a a KTM ish woods bike. Like, don't start off on like a motocross bike, which a lot of people do foolishly. Then you realize the suspension's not tuned for that, the power delivery is
Hmm.
not the same, and any other nuances will just make your life harder. But a woods oriented bike, it I would say on the East Coast, something that's not too powerful or big. Like, you wouldn't want to go get on a 450 and go hit the East Coast woods as a newbie. It's just too much power.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Nate, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything you want to promote?
I don't think so, man.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you for coming on. That was fascinating because I knew with talking to you on regular at work about some of this, like, but I don't think I realized how exhausting it is. But it's the part you love about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could say we were talking about like when I was younger, I took a long hiatus away from racing. Like when I was
Yeah.
15, I think 15 was my last motocross race. And then I didn't start riding till my mid 30s. I think I raced my first race in my late at 38, I think I was. And I just remember thinking, like, holy shit, if I knew this woods racing, I had no idea it existed. But I'm like,
Yeah.
if I knew this existed when I was in my teens and 20s, and it sounds like it was much more difficult, challenging, and endurance based back then. Of course, that's what all the old timers say. I can't say for sure because I wasn't there, but I think I would have been hooked at a very young age, and I think my whole life would have been
Do you
consumed
think
with it as
it's
far as my hobby.
what do you see for the future of enduro racing? Like, do you see any major changes coming?
I think it's getting tougher and tougher to for these clubs and and even our organization to secure land to hold them on. So I've seen some changes in outside of racing with more openness to land use for off-road vehicles. I'm hoping that spills over into our sport, but currently that's probably the biggest challenge is
Hmm.
them getting land to hold these events, or keeping land for that matter.
Would you go any farther west for a race? Like, have you ever thought about going in the middle of the state or out in the Colorado area or anything like that?
I probably will someday when I've gone to Michigan on a whim once, raced, been in Ohio a couple times. I will probably entertain more of that when my son's older. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's quite the commitment to go out there. It's a couple few days to do something like that. But yeah, I'd like to.
Cool. Well, I think that's all I got, Nate.
Okay.
Thanks, homie, for coming on.
See you at work tomorrow.
See you, buddy. See you.
Later.